Has everyone here heard of Slay in Your Lane before? Yeah. So just for those who didn't know, Slay in Your Lane takes the incredibly personal stories of 39 successful Black British women spanning loads of different disciplines, including space scientist Maggie Aderin Pocock, author Mallory Blackman, DJ Clara Anfo, and director Amma Sante, and puts it into a very pink, digestible format. Yomi and Elizabeth have been working well. I think the first time I heard about it was we went for a meal in Croydon, and it was like years ago, and you were sort of like, I got this idea, and we're like, how to do
idea,
sorry. Elizabeth had this idea, and you were like trying to push it through to some publishers, and since then I feel like it's just really skyrocketed, and it's been really lovely to watch. Yeah, it's a pleasure. But firstly, I just want to know about how you two became friends, basically, because these two have the most incredible friendship I think I've ever come across. We hung out in Lagos in was it October, and we just had a really good time. But you never stop chatting, and you know so much about each other, and so yeah, I want to know how that came about. How did you fall in love?
Yeah, I'd say I definitely fell in love first. Elizabeth hates it, but I'm always like, it's funny because I guess at our university it was like super white, and there was like a really sort of small Black population. So just naturally, by virtue of like everybody being white, you find that common ground of like, oh, you're Black. It's like spot the Black person and hang around with them. So I guess when we were sort of building our initial friendships, to be honest, the kind of common denominator was like skin tone and colour as opposed to actual interest. And I think with me and Elizabeth, what we kind of realised over time is that, you know, we'd like go to ACS societies and like loads of sort of like NSOC, which was like a Nigerian society and stuff. But then as time went on, you kind of realised that like the only thing we actually had in common with a lot of the people were just, that we were all Black and we were in a predominantly white institution. But with me and Elizabeth, we kind of, I guess within that, like kind of found that ours went beyond that. Like, it wasn't just that we were from South London, like she's from Peckham and I'm from Croydon, and that we were both Nigerian. It was more just like, like, you know, we talk a lot about in the kind of least weird way, like that you can have soulmates that are friends, and I do think like, we were kind of just soulmates. We just really got each other, and I think that it was funny because I guess when we first met, I kind of met her and thought, I'm not really sure if she's as keen on me as I am, because I'm like quite a lot, but I remember normally I'm like, if I meet somebody and they're not like immediately in love with me, I'm like, okay, bye. But with Elizabeth, I was like, I've got to be, like, I don't know if there's some higher calling. I was like, I have to be friends with this girl. Maybe I was like, she's gonna get us a book deal. Like, but I knew I had to be friends with her, and like, I kind of wore her down, essentially. Yeah, literally, yeah.
And Elizabeth, you get called Polly.
Can
you tell the audience? Yeah, because is that not a nickname that you came up with? Or is that,
it is. My mum literally calls her Polly.
Oh, really? Okay.
A lot of our uni friends call me Polly. So everyone's like, when I'm in new places, I'm like, do you mind being called Liz? And I'm like, of course, I don't really mind. Like, you can dissect my name whatever in many ways you can. But Polly is, I guess, the name that people call me, that people know me. So I never really mind if I'm called Liz, Beth, Liza, whatever. But yeah, it's one of those.
Because she's short, so it was like Polly Pocket. It wasn't just completely random, by the way. Yeah, it was like, because she's like Polly Pocket and she's short. It seemed smarter at the time, but
not anymore. And so the second thing I wanted to talk about was your sort of introduction into writing, because as I know that for you it wasn't something that you had, well, I don't know, had you ever considered writing a book before? Like, was that ever something that had been on your mind before you came up with the idea for Slay in Your Lane?
No, I never thought that I was ever going to write anything substantial. And by that I mean even a dissertation. So I didn't do a dissertation deliberately because I just hate the pressure of having to I'm more of an exam person, like under pressure, bang out an exam. So when I guess the idea of Slay in Your Lane came about, it wasn't something that I saw myself doing. It was something that I was like, okay, I need a writer. And I need a writer to do this, and I need, and obviously that's why I called Yomi and I said, she should write the book. So yeah, no, writing is not something that I'm more of an ideas person, and that takes some writing, and you do need to write. But I think the pressure of having to write a book like this was not something, and by like this I mean kind of like a book, a first of its kind that really looks back but looks forward as well. And I knew that it would be a lot of pressure, so I thought, okay, this is not my bag, and I need someone who can essentially do it justice. So I was lucky enough in my network essentially be able to call someone who is essentially doing the work already as a journalist, so it felt like a natural progression to kind of give her the idea. So yeah, writing was never something that I thought I'd be doing at all. But yeah.
Did you read a lot growing up though, or?
Yeah, I used to read like those, we talk about it all the time, like Jackie Collins and all those type of like chick lit books. Obviously Jacqueline Wilson and Marilee Blackman. So I used to read those type of books as well. So it was reading, I used to be on the back of the bus. I was that child on top of the top deck of bus, and I would take some, because I was like, what, 10? I shouldn't be reading some of the books I was reading. So I would take the thing off and like, so you couldn't see what I was reading the cover. Yeah, so I was literally like, so I was that type of, trying to plan for the future, trying to look ahead. I was very much a, what is life? And I used to bury myself a lot in fiction and reading all these, wonderful white women's like stories of, the most thriving thing, all I care about is like shopping and all those frivolous things. So I used to kind of like be whimsical about my life in the future, and I think fiction and those type of books allowed me to kind of bury my head away from like the kind of realities of what I was probably experiencing growing up.
And was that because some of your experiences growing up weren't as good as they could have been, or?
It's weird. I would say I had like a weird childhood that I don't think I'm probably coming to terms with. Not come to terms with, but I guess when you have to write a book and you have to look back at your life a little bit, you realise that you bury a lot sometimes that you didn't realise, and you think about, oh, okay, that happened to me, and then that was a bit weird, and then that was a bit weird, and you think about, so you make all these links, and I always say to move forward, you really have to go backwards and really think about how you came to be. And I don't think until I started thinking about and writing the book, I don't think I appreciated my past as much. So I think writing was able, and it's weird, someone was like, oh, part memoir. And I was like, wow, this book is really not, obviously we have our own personal experiences, but it's really not, it's just like probably a couple of stories, because I think between me and Yomi, I think what we were able to kind of, when we first met, we had so many stories to tell each other about growing up, and it was just so weird because we grew up very different households and very different like setups, but we had a lot of stories that we could, I guess, not stories about race, but just general stories about growing up and navigating things that was not things that were different, but things that were similar as well. So I think writing was just one of those things where I never saw doing, and I think when you have to kind of like look back a little bit in your past, you kind of unearth like, oh gosh, that was a bit weird. But I think when I'm 50 or something, I write a proper book that, oh yeah, like this is what happened to me. But no, it was.
But I like that, like now having done so in your lane, that's something that you think that you can do as well, like that you know that you can do, that you can write that memoir when the time comes. Yomi, do you remember any of those stories that you guys first shared from like when you were sort of?
I was about to say, I was like, I don't think we can share them. But I do remember, like, I think, like a lot of it was just kind of like things that now, some of them have gone in the book, like a lot of them are like anecdotes and things that I think at the time when we were talking about it, it wasn't through any kind of like politicized or even racialized context or like, lens. It was very much just like, I remember even when we were sort of pulling together the book, I was telling Elizabeth about something that happened at school where we had this school play. We were doing a rendition of Grease, and like they basically cast me as Rizzo as opposed to Sandy, because the girl who got Sandy's part was like blonde haired, blue eyed, and like obviously I was black, and they cast me as like Rizzo in like the leather jacket bad girl. But the reason Elizabeth was like, oh my god, this has to go in the book, is because they made me sing Sandy's songs but they wouldn't let me play Sandy because I could sing. If I say so myself, I could sing. But yeah, I could sing. So literally they were like, I say could because I definitely cannot now. I was like in year 6, but they made me, and it's funny because everyone's like, oh, but when I told Elizabeth, like I was literally laughing, and I was like, oh yeah, and then they made me play Rizzo, and that's so crazy. And she was like, you do realise that like that's super racist. I was like, yeah, actually, now you mention it, because I went to a predominantly black school, so it wasn't, I cannot stand here and be like, this was like, you know, my secondary school was super white, and it was in Purley on this hill with like cows and deers and stuff. But I mean, I went to school in Croydon, so it was like predominantly black students and like quite a few black teachers. So I can't say that it was necessarily like something I immediately understood as racism or in that way because of who was doing it and also where I was. So then in hindsight, when I was kind of thinking about like, oh, it's quite literally that because she's blonde and got blue eyes, they are like, this is what Sandy looks like. And Elizabeth was like, you need to put that in the book. And I think like, yeah, there were a lot of experience like of things like that like when you're talking about it with your best friend, like you're not really thinking about it in terms of like, this is a Twitter thread, like I'm gonna like write an essay about this. It really was just like, oh, this is an anecdote about life. And then when you get older, you're like, God, that was actually, as Elizabeth said, like quite weird and like very problematic and racist. And then, yeah, like a lot of them went into the book and the rest of them like will never be uttered amongst anyone that's not Elizabeth. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, on that note, actually, I did a really interesting interview with Lolly Adefope yesterday, and she was telling me, she's great, she's a comedian, actor, if you guys haven't heard of her, but she was telling me a story about how when she was in school, her friends used to do this, like her white friends used to do this thing where they would take a picture of just like a random black person they'd see like a bouncer at a club or like on the street, and then they'd upload the pictures to Facebook and like tag her in them, which like at the time, yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's at the time she just like passed it off like this is nothing, you know, ha ha ha. But she was like, in hindsight, I'm like, trauma. Like,
where were those friends?
Yeah, yeah, they're not friends anymore. I hope. Yeah. But yeah, when Elizabeth called you, that's the moment I'm interested in. Were you like, okay, this is it, I want to do this? Were you like, or yeah, what was your reaction?
From what I remember, I'm always saying that it was like I had this like That's So Raven moment where like I saw the future and I was like, oh my God, like I could immediately, like Elizabeth knows this, like I really was like, this is just an amazing idea. And I definitely thought, like I never, even when she like first started talking about it to me and was like, yeah, this is what I think you should do, I always just, as far as I saw it going and when I kind of transported myself to like this point where, you know, it like sold loads of copies and was doing really well, I didn't see it as ever being just a book. I was like, what she's just said is like really like important and like definitely something that I wouldn't even just say hasn't really been done in the same way in this country, just in like even like other like places with predominantly white populations, but like obviously black populations within them, they don't really exist. So I was like, this could really be something, and I think that it's something that Elizabeth has a really important skill set that she can bring to it as well, which is not just being able to write very well, but also like being, you know, she was a marketing manager and like really good at her job, just being able to make it into more of a campaign and a movement and make it like bigger than, you know, the text. So I kind of like pitched it back to her and was like, you know, what, like, how about you do it as well and we like co-write it? And yeah, at that moment, I'm not even gonna lie, I remember as she was talking, I was like literally like, I think I had like my laptop or something and I was like typing in like black like books that are like, because initially her reference point was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg and was like, there's nothing like that. So I was quite literally typing in like black books, like black Lean In, black whatever. And then I went on Twitter and I typed in black Lean In and there were all these black women being like, why don't we have a black version of Lean In? And I was like screenshotting it and immediately I was like, yeah, this has to be done and it has to be done by both of us. But yeah, I was so excited. I saw pound signs, yen, naira, I saw everything. I was like, this is gonna be big.
That dollar emoji.
I was literally the one with the tongue out. But yeah, but also I honestly like, we really did feel like it was something that like, not to be like self-righteous, but we really kept saying that like, whatever we do, it has to be bigger than us, because at the time Elizabeth was 22, I was 23. We really didn't know anything. And the reason that Elizabeth was like, I want you to write this book is because she was saying that like, she was having like trouble like navigating the workspace, and I was having the exact same trouble that like all kind of black, well most, I don't want to speak for everyone, but lots of black female graduates have when they're in predominantly white spaces. You kind of feel like, I've made it, I've got the training contract, I've got the graduate job, and then you get to this space and there's just like invisible, you know, like not even just glass ceiling, like concrete ceiling, as Elizabeth speaks about in the book. So she quite literally was like, can you write this for me? I remember that's how she worded it, like, oh, can you write this book for me? And then, so we were kind of like, okay, this has to be outside of us and like help like as many people as we can with it, because it's much bigger than like two girls' journey. Does that make sense?
And how long did it take you guys to sort of kick off the process? Because I know you were like 22 and 23 when you first conceptualized it.
I'm 27 now.
Oh my God.
Bloody hell, it's been years.
Yeah, and it came out last year. So
Crazy.
yeah, how long did it take to get it off the ground?
So March 2015 was the call. Then we...
Good memory.
Yeah. Once you say it, like, I say that all the time, like March 2015. It was not 2016. So yeah, March 2015 was the call, and we were pretty much like in the throes of it straight away. So it was something that I guess Yomi would like send me messages, and at that time we were living together. Yeah, we were. So Yomi would message me or like before I woke up, and she would already, cause she had like shifts, so she would go into work already, and I'd wake up to like a text being like, we have to do this today, and like someone's gonna do this idea, and da 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 da, and so these panic things. And I'm more laid back in that respect. So I'm like, yeah, no, but no one will do it as good as us, don't worry. And like I'm just very much like, but Yomi's like, doesn't matter, da da da. So because of that kind of urgency, we spent that summer, so it was March 2015, and we spent that summer essentially like coming up with the proposal and like working on it. So the research around like why does this book need to exist, and we did a focus group. So we invited people that we knew, people we didn't know, and we put them in a room and we were like, okay, cool. So this is the idea that we wanted, like what is our idea? What do you guys think? So that feedback kind of informed how we shaped the proposal. So it was just like research, putting things together. And yeah, so that kind of started it. And then I don't know what happened. I think life got in the way, and then we got representation by the end of that year by our agent, and 2016 was spent essentially refining it to a point where, and I think as well was weird because we were post uni but had this idea but still navigating our kind of lives as well, and navigating essentially these structures like these workplaces, but also just life in general and relationships and things like that. So I think it was, even though March 2015, and if we had our way, we'd done it a lot sooner, but I think we had to kind of get that kind of like sorted and just kind of put things where they needed to be. So when we were kind of like ready to get the deal, we were kind of like all guns blazing.
Yeah. And was your agent, when you got them, did they seem quite certain that this was a book that they thought would do well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, she just, I think, yeah, she just got it. And for us, like for a white woman to just essentially get it and not want to kind of change anything, to be like, oh, you make it a woman of colour, or change anything in it, and just kind of just make sure that she's like, we were putting things in there that, because it was just, our proposal was crazy. Like we had a picture of Solange Knowles at the front, we had pictures of like all of these people, and we created like personas, like this girl would buy it called Kemi because XYZ, and this person would buy it because this, and different age groups, because we were just like...
Do you think I read it? I just remember, because you sent it to me. Yeah, I remember that. It was a great proposal. It was, to be fair. You put a lot of effort into it.
We really did. Yeah, it really was. And I think that was what helped, because we ended up getting like a 9-way kind of like bidding auction, and they hadn't met us at that point. So I think it was on the strength of us just doing the research and us essentially creating this thing that, regardless if you're a white man in a publishing house or you're a black woman, you just got what we were trying to say. And I think that essentially took time. And I think I think in that process we were totally fine in terms of.
And what were the sort of biggest challenges, like post, getting the deal? Like, was it finding the right people to talk to? Were people quite willing to give you their time, or was it navigating the incredibly white publishing world? Like, what sort of reared its head at that stage?
I'd say in terms of challenges, I think one that like people assume a lot, and I never like to say that it's not an issue, because it definitely is for a lot of people I know that have like published books like since, definitely. But I think because, as Elizabeth said, we had so much sort of interest, one of the issues that we were really sort of expecting was just that like we'd basically present this, like, for lack of a better phrase, like unapologetically black like proposal of what we wanted, and then people would say like, can you scale it back? Can you change it? Can you make it African American? Can you just basically change our vision? But because so many people were interested, we were kind of like, if this person says we don't want it to be like this, then we'll just go to somebody else essentially. So to be honest, in terms of like keeping it how we wanted it to be, it definitely was like, completely fine, to be honest, and keeping it authentic. And I think that's genuinely why it's done well, because it really, we can honestly say that this is exactly the book we hoped we'd put out. But in terms of what I think was a genuine issue, which probably lots of people would guess correctly, was just time management. We both had quite demanding jobs, and we couldn't afford to quit them. And I think that's, publishing, people talk a lot about books being like, and being a writer essentially, like quite it's a luxury essentially. Like to be able to live off writing is not something that many like second generation immigrant children from South London have the ability to do, and we definitely did not. So, Elizabeth kept her job in Canary Wharf. I was working at Channel 4 at the time. We quite literally writing doing interviews with the women during like lunch breaks. We'd like literally, it was, I guess as well, like we're very lucky because we have a very strong relationship, but it could have taken a toll on anyone else's relationship because it was like we were taking our work with us everywhere. So Elizabeth lived with me and my mum in like our proper house. So it was literally like we'd open the door and be like shouting across the hall, being like, I've got this idea, yeah, that's great. And my mum would be like, can you guys shut up? Like, it's like, it was really a lot. And I think like we were so passionate about it that it was really all consuming, and it was all we did. So we like stopped going raving. That was like a big bedrock of our friendship. Like, and we like stopped going out, and we like couldn't do anything other than pretty much the book. And we'd literally be doing the book during work, like after work, like on weekends. Like it was literally just because we had to do minimum 80,000 words, and we ended up doing 120,000, and conduct the interviews and go to like our 9 to 5s. So I think it was time management. Like we were just absolutely knackered all the time. But we always say we always took it in like shifts. Like, so if Elizabeth felt a bit down or like tired or just like fed up, I'd be like, come on, you got to keep going, girl. And then it was only like one of us at a time, and then if I felt really down, she'd be like, you know, you got to keep going, kind of thing. And then if we both felt down, like just nothing got done. We'd both just sit there. But yeah, I think the biggest issue was just time, and like not, like, yeah, we burnt out a lot, and I think we didn't actually realise until about a year later, but then a year later was pretty much when the book came out. So then we just, even though we knew we were burnt out, we had no choice but to prolong it. So like, yeah, we were just kind of like still doing stuff despite like being so tired, like we just had no choice.
Do you think there's ever a way to produce something like you produced without putting yourselves through
being really rich? I'm not even joking.
Yeah.
If you can afford, it's really sad, and it's true. Like if you can afford to like not, you know, if you can afford to literally not have the money to like, you know, to not have an income, then you're fine. But like this is why publishing looks the way it does, because it's just a lot of people can't afford to take the time it does to put the work out, or you do what we did and what so many of our friends that are published, and what honestly you probably did in terms of like freelancing and stuff. Like you can't really afford to be like, I'm not working. You have to do both. And I'm really lucky, like I live at home, so I didn't even have rent and I was still struggling. But it's like, if you are paying rent, if you're doing whatever, it's just if I'm being perfectly honest, being really rich, being really privileged, like it's pretty much it. And just, if you're lucky, having somebody that you're working with that can kind of prop you up, because there's absolutely no way either of us could have done this on our own, because it was just absolutely, even with 2 people, it was so tiring.
So much work, yeah.
But worth it, guys. Don't be put off. Honestly, don't be put off, for real. Yeah.
Yomi, I forgot to ask you about your upbringing and how you got into writing. Obviously, we know that you are a super successful journalist.
Thank you.
I remember reading your pieces on Viewpoint
Oh my God.
News, which was this really weird ITV.
I'm glad you said weird.
Yeah, it was weird. Weird ITV kind of like, it was like a branch or something, wasn't it?
So
for like young people. Anyway, Yomi's work really stood out because it was fresh. It was like entertaining. I remember seeing like a picture up and like the guy who ran it telling me like, Yomi, she's one to watch out for. So yeah, like tell us about how you ended up there.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, like my dad was like a massive reader, like literally obsessed with books. And like, it's funny because he's got 2 daughters that are both journalists. So my older sister is a journalist. Like she covered like the riots and stuff, and now she lives in Nigeria and like works at BBC Nigeria. And before that, like I remember seeing her kind of like doing journalism and stuff, and weirdly, despite having somebody like, because we look really similar, like that looked exactly like me in journalism, I still didn't feel like journalism was something that I could do, which is just so bizarre, because it's like the exact representation you could want, and I still was like, it's for white men. And yeah, like, so I never really was kind of one of these people that, and it's interesting because journalism is definitely an industry where you get people that have always wanted to be journalists and always wanted to be writers. And I think Elizabeth can attest that like at uni I was not like, I want to be a journalist, I want to be a writer. Like I studied law, I hated law, I took a year out because of depression, and then it was on that year out that I started blogging and like writing just for recreation, and someone was like, oh, you can do this, it's and get paid, it's called journalism. And I was like, oh, which is so dumb because my sister was like an actual journalist for years before that. But so then I started like a publication with some money from like O2 Think Big and this platform called Vinspired, and it's really sad because I don't know if they still, I know O2 Think Big still runs, but all those things that allowed me to like kind of find myself by people like giving me money to like start magazines. I used to like give it out in Afro hair shops in South London. Like I don't know if they exist anymore, because they gave me like you know £500 and then £300, and I was able to like properly do like a print publication. And then that was literally just an outlet. And then once I went back to uni, I was like, I want to be a writer now and I want to do journalism. But yeah, like it wasn't a like I never did like an NCTJ or like was like I'm going to be a journalist. It was literally like I was a blogger and then did millions of internships, and then yeah, we got really lucky and started at Viewpoint, that weird, they literally took a chance on me and were like, you know, you have no like official qualifications, but we think you can write. So yeah, that was it really. And then here I am.
Oh yeah, he's a sweet guy. But yeah, I think that just shows you like when it comes to journalism, and I see this all the time through Galdem as well. A lot of the people that we published right at the very beginning who had no experience in journalism have now gone on to like very illustrious like careers. And yeah, it just shows you don't need to have gone through that like very like laborious, expensive training process. To,
do you have the qualification?
Yeah, so I did do that because it's actually interesting. So I was speaking to Liz Pears, who works at BuzzFeed. She's a really brilliant news editor, one of like the few quite senior black women who work within journalism. And she was saying the reason why she went and did all of her qualification was because she saw so few people. It's the same as what you were saying, that she felt as though to make herself feel legitimate, she had to get qualified, and that's kind of that's kind of how I felt as well. It's like, to be a journalist, I need to do this, this, and this, and then I was like, how am I going to do that? I don't have any money, so I applied for lots of bursaries. But that was my
and it's weird as well because I still say to Elizabeth, despite like everything I've done and everything I'm doing, like I'm always like, oh, maybe I should get an NCTJ, because I genuinely still feel like a bit of a fraud. Like it doesn't.
You're fine.
Yeah, I know. But I still feel like it's like that weird, like, and I know it's stupid, but I'm always like, oh, I just think to be a bit more whatever, like it'd be great to have one, even though I literally know I don't need one, but because it's weird, like if someone's like to me, should I get an NCTJ? I'm always still like yes, because I'm like, I don't even know that many white people that I've worked with that don't, because again, it's like not to get into like class and like money and stuff, but again, it really is like, I was lucky, I lived at home, so I was able to like pay out of my own pocket to like go to unpaid internships. Most people don't necessarily have that like that sort of cushion there. And I'm always saying to people like, yeah, I still think that they should get one if they can afford it, because it is really hard. And it's like, even in terms of working class white people that I've worked alongside, it's like they've had to be like absolutely exemplary to be there. So it's just like, and then black people, I'm like, there's literally hardly any anyway. So I'm like, and almost all of them have it. So I'm always kind of like in two minds of whether.
Yeah, no, it's wild, isn't it? We have not spoken about Nigeria yet. Obviously, both of you have Nigerian heritage, and we, as I was saying, we had a really good time together in Lagos. But one of the things that stayed with me that you guys told me about was your experience of going into the school there when you were giving a talk about Stay in Your Lane. I think you told me that while you were there, you were trying to talk to the kids about, was it about racism?
Yeah, it was about racism.
And they didn't really know what it was. And I thought that was like really interesting experience. I was wondering if you could tell the guys about that, and just about how it sort of translated. Oh, you're not there?
No. Imagination. You know what? I overslept. Sorry.
I was like, oh, she was with me.
Yeah. Yomi went.
Yeah. Yeah. It was bizarre, and it really sounds like one of those like anecdotes that like is made up. Like, you know, when Sherry Blair was like, oh, all women. Yeah, there's like stupid things that just aren't true. But this genuinely was that like. In Nigeria, they did this when we went to the Ake festival there. They sort of sent loads of the writers to local schools, and I went to one of the schools and I was sort of explaining to them like what our book was about, and I was with another author called Chibundu who had written about Lagos, and obviously all the kids were really sort of receptive. It was a mixed class, so let's say from like 11 to about 15, and everyone was kind of really receptive, and the kids were like literally like the smartest children I've ever seen. Like the education system there's super rigorous, so everyone was really smart and really switched on, and I remember when they were kind of like, what's your book about? I was like, oh well, me and my best friend wrote this book about what it's like to be a black woman in Britain, and I was like, because I was trying to explain why it was necessary. So I was like, you know, it's a predominantly white country, everyone there's white, and obviously they know this, and I was like, and you know, being black, like there's, you know, instances of racism, and no one said anything. And I was like, and then I kind of went into more detail, like, yeah, you know, so you people that are white get preferential treatment, black people are like, you know, in terms of jobs and in terms of like just anything institutionally are like, you know, at a sort of they're at a disadvantage. And because no one was reacting, I kind of was like, do you guys know what racism is? And they were like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, so have you guys ever heard the word racism before? And they were like, no. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And this was quite a rural school. And I was like, well, no, obviously no wonder, like there's no need for them to. But then I was like, okay, so in terms of what I mean, I was like, well, I compared it to tribalism, and I was like, because that's like a real scourge in Nigeria. I was like, yeah, you know, like, so it's kind of like how some people treat Igbo people differently to Yoruba people and vice versa, and Hausa, and I was talking about tribes, and they were like, oh, and I was like, yeah, they do that to black people though, like based on them being black. And it really hadn't like occurred to them, because I think the thing about Nigeria as well is that like, it's a very, I mean, I assume most people know, like it's a very, like in terms of class, like it's a really, I think their class system here is probably even more severe than it is here. Like it's a very classist society, and like whilst the education system is really good and rigorous, there is literally no reason for black children that have no proximity to whiteness or Europe or kind of like it ever traveling to understand what racism is, because this was, as much as the school was very good in terms of what they were teaching them, it was very rural, and they knew all kinds of, like, anyone that's Nigerian knows how like Nigerians like to use big words and like lots of kind of complex sentences. They like, their English was exemplary, they spoke really brilliantly, and they knew everything else. It's just the concept of racism, they just had no reason to understand it, and they seemed completely baffled by it. I was just like, but why? I was like, but why tribalism? They're like, fair, like none of it makes sense. So yeah, but it was a really, I remember I came back and I was completely rattled. I was just like, I can't believe they've never heard this word, but also the concept makes no sense. It was weird.
How have your sort of like Nigerian family members reacted to the book? Have any of them read it or given you any feedback?
Have any of them read it? My mum pretends to have read it. She's not read that. She's not read it. And I know she hasn't read it, otherwise she'd have complained about stuff. But my nan's genuinely reading it, and I'm like nervous because like I just don't want her to get to any bits of swearing. I'm like, no, please. But yeah, lots of them have read it. My sister is reading it on audio. I don't think even Yem's read it. My older sister, I don't think she's read it.
No.
But they're all super proud, and like they genuinely like. We're all really close, and like my mum literally sees Elizabeth as her literal daughter. So like she's just totally like, yeah, like just super proud, and just, you know, has all like on our TV, she's like recorded every appearance me and Elizabeth have ever done, and is constantly, yeah, she's really, really like, yeah, she's, I think as well, she's seen me and Elizabeth's friendship from pretty much the start. So I'm always saying, for the, you know, more than anyone, I think she finds it really surreal, because I'm always saying that like no one can ever pretend that they'd have picked me and Elizabeth out and been like, these two are going to do something, because we just weren't like that at uni. We were complete messes. So I'm like, there's no way that anyone would have seen it coming. But I think my mum more than anyone's like, oh my God, like you girls were a mess. What's going on? Like you guys are really thrived. So yeah, like
that exact word.
Yeah, I mean, she's like, what happened? But yeah, they're just really, really happy and really proud of us. And yeah, it's been really nice. Like, and really, yeah, it's been lovely to see.
Mm-hmm. And then, Liz, more generally, what has the reaction to the book been like from, I guess, young Black British women?
I think it's just been really overwhelming. I think ultimately wanted this book to help people, and that was like, and to validate their experiences. So I think number one, when someone just says, oh yeah, like it really spoke to me, then that's just the job done. So it just feels makes all those late nights, all those like stresses, it makes it worth it. So yeah, I think ultimately the fact that you can read your own experience, or a part of your experience, because we can't speak to, I think what's interesting about this book is we're obviously two girls from South London, two Black girls, and it's very authentic, the way we kind of pulled this book together. It almost feels like a startup within a kind of bigger production, but it's essentially us, and we made sure that at every point it was something that we signed off and was very involved with. So we want this book to kind of speak to as many people as possible, but ultimately to the person I essentially wanted Yomi to write this book for, which was me. Yeah. So that's amazing. I think what was really special as well about this book is we didn't want it to be just London focused as well, because, you know, we're both from South London. We just didn't want it to the conversation just to stay here. So we made the effort to we went to Birmingham like 3 times. We've been to Manchester, we've done Bradford, we've done Edinburgh, Aberdeen. Is Aberdeen?
I can't remember.
Yes. We've done both at Edinburgh and somewhere else. Yeah, it might be, yeah. And it's interesting to hear their experiences it's different to ours, but they can still find themselves, they can still find a piece of their story in this book. And so that's really amazing, because within 120,000 words, it's disingenuous to not be able to kind of relate at all to something. So yeah, I think what this book is really important to kind of start a conversation. And I think that when you meet young Black women, they want to talk to you, and I think that is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you must get so many people coming up to you these days, just being like, hi.
Yeah, was one time like Shoreditch, we were walking, and some guy was like, well done, girls, and we were like, We were like, what?
He was trying to give us a flyer.
Yeah, because he had to fly out.
We had to get us to the race, and we're
Yeah,
like,
exactly. He was like, no, well done. And we were like, and I'm just one of those people, I'm like, Yomi's more of a talker. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm leaving. And then he was like, no, he was like, slay in your lane. And we were like, oh my God. And he was like, I bought it for my girlfriend. And we were like, oh, wow. Yeah. And I was at a bus stop in like North London, and a girl was like, hi, are you one of the Slay in Your Lane girls? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so that was just like so weird to kind of just recognize, because it's you don't necessarily get that every day. So yeah.
Do you guys feel like entrepreneurs at this point? Do you feel like you're building something bigger than just the book? Is it going to be a brand?
I think ultimately we're like, so I would say we're enterprising. And I think that's what I guess we've always just been able to kind of, I think a lot of black women are enterprising generally, because you have to be able to kind of see the kind of, you know, rubbish of the world and kind of make the most out of it in order to survive and hopefully thrive as well. So I think that entrepreneurship, we can, you know, look at that in 10 years, 5 years, see how that goes. But ultimately, I think that we're just enterprising, and we want to be able to kind of make the best out of every situation, and not, you know, not sugarcoat it, not kind of like gloss it over, but be very honest and say, yeah, things are like this, but we can do this, and this is what's yet to be done. And you don't have to put, like, we get asked questions that we're like, oh my God, we have no idea how to answer this. This is a big question about how to affect, like, institutional change in this area, but I think, and we're like always reminding ourselves that we're on a journey as well, as much as you guys. So I think ultimately we're just enterprising, and we just want to kind of tell our, like, represent ourselves as best as possible, and kind of tell the stories that matter to us. So yeah, so ultimately we'll see how that enterprising nature comes into where it takes us. Yeah.
Yomi, how now do you feel like you fit into the wider media landscape as like a Black British writer?
That's such a good question. I don't know, honestly, because I was thinking about it, because obviously I recently started at The Guardian as their like women's columnist, and thank you, girl, thank you. Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you. And I think it really made me think, because like I don't know, like I've never really thought about, like, honestly what I've put out there, unless it's in a sort of article. That's where I'm like, I really think, and I'm really like curating and trying to like make a point. But on things like social media and stuff, like I'm really just there, and I'm just there, like, you know, people just, I'm just here for the laughs. Like I'm just here to like retweet rubbish and laugh. And I'm not particularly, like my Twitter, I would say it's representative of me, but really one facet, and probably my most stupid facet. So I started thinking about, like, I was looking the other day, and when I like put out my first few articles, like it coincided with me going to like 2 award shows. No, I went to the RTS Awards, and then I went to like this Black Girl Magic Gala with Elizabeth, and like I was wearing this dress, and I had all this makeup on, and like the dress was like, you know, it was kind of like cleavage-ish, and like, you know, I was like taking these mirror selfies, and I was like putting it up, and like, you know, I wouldn't even think twice about putting that on Instagram and like putting that on Twitter especially. But I really thought to myself, God, like this is exactly the kind of thing that, like, now I'm in front of this completely different audience, like middle-aged white cerebral men, like they're definitely going to look at this and be like, so this is the women's columnist for The Guardian, like she's, for the first time I thought about it, and obviously I still posted it anyway, but I just thought, like, even engaging in things like, you know, you'll definitely get this like niche black Twitter, like, you know, there are those things where something will happen. I don't know if you remember the Renee versus like, what's her name? Ivorian doll. There was something where I remember these girls were like fighting on. It was like this really like specific Twitter beef that, like, I was like, oh, what's going on? And all these kind of accounts were like talking about it, and I was like, oh, there were all these people making these jokes about it, and I was like, oh, time for me to retweet this. And I thought, God, is this even stuff I should be publicly engaging with? Does this somehow invalidate, like, does this make me somehow come across less, like, you know, I don't know if you saw that posty thing, say East London.
No, I honestly, you know, I've been really disengaging with social media.
So you're totally, I'm just talking, like, see, this is the wreck I talk on Twitter, where I'm like, oh God, like, oh, you know, gossip. I'm like going on Bossip and like retweeting their headlines and just being a mess. And I was just like, oh God, like, do I have to not do that now? Do I have to think about what I put on Instagram and like how I like act? Because I don't like how I engage with other people, because now it's way more visible. And it's something that, if I'm being honest, I'm definitely thinking about, because I'm not really sure I do fit in the media landscape anymore, because so much of what me and Elizabeth's doing is front facing. And it means that, like, you know, sometimes like on my Instagram, I'll put up like, you know, if someone gives us shoes or something, like, well, and we put up a thing, it's, oh, gifted. I'm like, God, it's weird, because I'm like, I'm writing for The Guardian now, and it kind of feels almost contradictory, because yeah, and then it's like, you know, getting your makeup done to go to like this glam award ceremony. It's especially because the kind of publication The Guardian is, it's people that take themselves very seriously. I don't take myself seriously at all. So I'm like, when J Hus was released, I'm like, wait, I don't want to be talking about what this means about the representation of like black men holding knives. I'm like, I just like his music, leave me alone. So yeah, I think honestly, I have to be, it's really made me think just about, you know, of course I'll always be how I am, but just whether I choose to present it or not. At the moment, I'm choosing to, but I think in terms of fitting, I'm like, oh, I really don't feel honestly like I fit anywhere, because I feel like really young and I feel really black. So I'm just like, I can't really work out where I go at the moment. But I think there's value in that, to be honest, because it means I can do like really serious stuff and be like, oh, I'm talking about, you know, period poverty on Monday in my column, and then the next day it's like, I'm writing about something completely different. And like, sometimes, like, you know, I did a documentary on like black women in the grime scene. That's a very serious issue, but it's a very different issue. And I think it means I'm allowed to straddle things in a different way that's like, you know, yeah, I personally like, but we'll see how long it lasts before they drive me out.
I think as well, it's like you are, and the current generation of young black public-facing figures who do straddle that line are the first of their kind to do it.
It's like respectability politics and stuff. I'm like, we weren't good at it at uni, and I'm definitely not good at it now. So I'm kind of just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Do you guys have any tips for sort of young, budding, enterprising people, or writers, or marketing dons?
I would say journal and write your ideas. You may not have time to kind of always take a day to just sit there and kind of like have your ideas presented to you, and just like, that inspiration doesn't come from just sitting down in a room and just writing or pulling ideas together. I think it's about always just being out there in the world and experiencing things. It's about looking at the extraordinary in the ordinary. It's not, you don't have to go on a lavish holiday to find the next best idea, or go traveling like Cuba. I know we were talking about Cuba earlier, but nothing's like, just, you know, you can literally just have like a genuine, just a great idea just by doing something and solve a great problem. If it's a book or whatever product that you want it to be, just by experiencing the world and just by being curious about things, about people, about other people's experiences, and those are the ways you connect the dots around what's gonna come next, or what people want, and how you can be a trendsetter, and how you can, I guess, shape conversations and not just contribute to them as just, you know, shift from becoming a consumer to an owner mindset. That's what I'd say. And also just carry a notebook all around. I think that makes a big difference, because writing on a phone is nice, but being able to kind of write down, oh, this is a weird thought, and writing it down, and then a day later writing it down it's weird how you can start connecting the dots to things and people and your own ideas and yourself. It's almost weird. It's subconscious. Subconscious it leads you to things. It's weird. Like when you have a week and the same thing keeps happening, it's not a coincidence. Or do you know what I mean? I think Slaying is not coincidence, because the idea came from that moment of, oh, there needs to be a book, but it came from me essentially being very like curious and like, oh, I'm navigating this world that I don't understand, but I want to, like, so I'm reading this book I'm being curious about this book, and then what does this world mean to me? Like, how do I kind of like thrive in it? My boss is white, his boss is white, his boss is white. Where do I, so asking those questions always leads to like amazing things.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. Because I don't write anything down. But yeah, I'd say like, I'm always saying that, like, you know, it's so cheesy, but genuinely you just have to be authentic. Like, you really have to, because it's even beyond like everyone else is taken, but it's just genuinely like, in the same way that journaling and putting like your ideas and, like, you know, your subconscious tells you things. It's kind of like, how can you even hear your subconscious when you're not like in tune with who you are, kind of thing. And I just think that, like, you know, Slaying Your Lane, it really was like two people that weren't afraid to sort of be themselves coming together, and whatever happened, like we were very hell bent on how it was going to be, and we were very much like, if we can't find a publisher to do it how we want to do it, then we'll self-publish, because we were really committed to it being authentic. And people just like, what's the word, like react to that, and they can feel when things are fake, especially young people. Like they really kind of sense, like, and like, I mean like kids, like they can just sense when someone's being like phony and stuff. And I think it's just really important to stay in tune with who you are, and also just, it's really straightforward, but just being nice. Me and Elizabeth were talking about this the other day, and just how, like, you know, it's not even just doing a job well, it's about like how you do it. It's about like how you talk to people along the way, and like just making sure that, like, yes, there, you know, throughout my career, I've seen when I was sort of working in big institutions, I'd see people sort of say, oh, you know, this person's amazing, should we bring them in? And they'd be like, well, they're really difficult to work with, so I'd rather honestly have someone that wasn't as good, but it's just easier to work with. And I'm just like, if you're good at what you do and you're just polite and like nice and, you know, just, yeah, like just just a nice person, it just makes it easier to work with you, essentially. And I think it's really underrated these days.
Yeah, just a bit of empathy and kindness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the final question, I don't know how much you can say about this, but what's next for Sigh in Your Lane? I heard rumours about another little thing.
Look out for an announcement at some point in April. Yeah.
This is April now.
This April.
Oh, sick.
This is April. Yeah.
Okay.
In a couple of days, in a couple of weeks, but yeah, at some
Okay.
point. Before, hope, yeah, if not after Easter, yeah.
All right, that's great. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you also to Black Girl Fest, Penguin, Michelle Obama.